don't mean to rehash what we're all reading in the news from federal level and state attacks on ESG. But so the sector is maturing, and so I'll start with one thing. You mentioned the 8 trillion of professionally managed assets in the United States. So I sit on the board of USIF, and one of the big issues that we were discussing is that because USIF has honed in its methodology and really pushed the asset managers when reporting, to, especially around ESG integration, to have to legitimate and argue and give examples as to why a certain number of assets are flagged or tagged as ESG integrated, which they didn't do in the past. The 8 trillion is actually a 40% drop from the previous USIF report. And so one of the risks in having a more, I'd say, mature and detailed approach to reporting on ESG assets is that you're seeing lesser assets being reported, which is the same exact thing happened in Europe when regulation was passed on reporting. The more regulation there is, the more the universe seems to be constrained, but with it comes veracity and authenticity. So so we're much more comfortable with the 8 trillion than the 14 or 15 trillion. I forget what was the last number in the last USIF report. The same is true with ESG ratings. MSCI, you probably read that and the FT and Bloomberg and so on, is downgrading hundreds of companies on ESG. So, and what is happening is that we're realizing that even the ESG ratings were generous and skewed towards the positive. And so you're seeing whether it's total number of assets or ESG ratings really being more constrained. And I think this is a great positive because it means we're having greater discipline in how we count and how we measure and how we analyze and how we critique ourselves as a sector. So I think that's fabulous. So that's one piece in terms of maturing. On the regulation side, we're at a really, and this is why this conversation, I think this topic that you brought up, Lori, is so important. We're at an inflection point because there's regulatory vacuum in a growing sector that is under attack. And we know that those on the right who are attacking or trolling the sector will go very far. A lot of our, I would say, people on the left never thought, oh, we will never get, there'll never be an overturn of Roe v. Wade. And yes, there was. So there's no assumption of common ground here. And because there's a vacuum around regulation, it's actually very dangerous because we're very concerned, or I should say, the discussions within USIF and some of the discussions within Barris, which is that if we don't defend, for example, SEC proposal on GHG emission disclosure, et cetera, those things can go away and or even counter to our sector, limit the powers of shareholder engagement and proxy voting. So my point is, this is the time to engage, to defend the sector. We can talk about how later, but my point is now is the time to engage because of that vacuum, because of the attacks. Even if the business community, asset managers, BlackRock, JP Morgan, I mean, everyone's more or less involved in the world of ESG, but we shouldn't take it for granted. This growth and this evolution of the sector, we shouldn't take for granted. The other piece I just wanted to mention is the press. So I am up in arms when I read when there's a topic that I know particularly well. I am shocked by how the press covers it. So we need, whether it's you, Lori, or David Banks at Impact Alpha, or other journalists who really are experts, we need to have that voice of the interviewer or of the writer or the investigative journalist to be writing about ESG and not the novice journalist who, and for example, in one outlet I was reading, I'll just name it, it was Bloomberg, talking about basically the battle for ESG is BlackRock versus, is the CEO of BlackRock versus DeSantis, that those are the two faces, and that BlackRock is the face of ESG. Nothing could be further from the truth. He has let us down. I mean, if you see his comments at the World Economic Forum and his kind of backtracking. So in 2021, he's all about, stakeholder capitalism and ESG and sustainability. And now he's losing, BlackRock is losing business. And you could see in the comments of the CEO, whether they're in writing or through interviews, that he's really not defending the sector. So having Bloomberg or the New York Times or the Financial Times, including Main Street, understand and represent what is truly happening in the sector is so important. And I don't know exactly how you empower those journalists, but for me, the press is so important. And it's been really shocking to know that the how can I put it, how shallow the understanding is of the ESG and trying to of the ESG sector, and also trying to oversimplify and dumb down a topic which really deserves full analysis, seeing the ramifications of hurting this sector, which is trying to move finance towards a more sustainable and regenerative economy.